Hello and welcome to the Cupcake Jemma channel. I'm just saying it because quite a lot of you spell my name wrong or even say my name wrong. I get Cupcake Jenna, Cupcake Jenny, all sorts. Anyway, it's Cupcake Jemma. Hopefully by now you'll know me. If not, welcome to my channel for the first time. Today I'm going to show you a technique. It's been a while since I did a technique rather than a recipe video, so this is an absolute fundamental thing that you should be able to do, so I thought I'd help you along. And this is going to be a technique video on how to do the perfect piped lettering. This is something I learned how to do, just taught myself how to do back in the day when I first started Crumbs Doilies. Initially I was terrible, it took a lot of practice, but once I got the hang of it, it was actually pretty easy. So I'm just going to show you all the things that I learned along the way, and so that you guys can do perfect lettering too. So the first thing I'm going to do is make the royal icing, and I prefer to use royal icing for piping rather than buttercream, because if I'm holding a piping bag with buttercream in it for a long time piping a really long message, it tends to melt with the heat of my hand. So royal icing doesn't do that. There's another couple of good reasons why royal icing is better. It dries really hard, so if you make a mistake and you're piping onto buttercream, you can just wait for it to dry and then just pick the whole letter off, rather than having to try and smush it off with buttercream, which is soft, of course. There's loads of good reasons. Royal icing is made of icing sugar, egg whites and water, and I'm going to be using powdered egg white. You can get this from good cake decorating websites or shops. If you can't get hold of it, you can just use egg white, like the real deal. But powdered egg white is best, just because it's safer and it's powdery and less gross. And also you don't waste the yolk. So I've got 400 grams of icing sugar. I'm going to put that into my bowl. I'm going to sieve it though, and I'm going to sieve it along with 15 grams of the powdered egg white. So once that's all nice and sieved, you can put that onto your mixer with just a regular paddle and get it going on a low speed. And obviously there's not really much mixing going on right now, but I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of water. Now with royal icing, another good reason to use royal icing is that you can alter the consistency to be however you like it. I find that 4 tablespoons to start with is a really good place to get it to a decent consistency, and then if you need it looser, you just add a few more drops. So once all your water's in, you want to whack the speed up to medium to high speed to give it a really good beat for about 5 minutes. So this has been mixing for about 5 minutes now, and it is still quite stiff, which is fine, but I'm going to struggle to squeeze that through my piping nozzle. So I'm going to add a few more drops of water. Now when you're adding extra water, you want to be really careful not to add too much. So just a little bit at a time, see what it looks like, test it, add more if you need to, just keep going until you've got it just right. All right, this is looking pretty perfect. If you find that you've put too much water in, that can happen, just add a little bit of icing sugar, spoonful by spoonful, until you get it back to the right consistency. This is a nice recipe because it's easy to fix if you kind of mess it up a little bit. But for now, because it dries so quickly, I'm going to put it into a Tupperware container, so an airtight container, or if you don't have one of those, just cling film a bowl. Just make sure it doesn't, just make sure it's airtight as much as possible. Otherwise it tends to go kind of crispy, which is not what we want, because then we'll get lumps in our piping bag, which is very annoying. Welcome back from just a second ago. So I am going to colour my royal icing before I put it into my piping bags. I've got a variety of colours. I've already done some blue. I've also just got a plain old white. And now I'm going to do pink. And as usual, I'm going to be using colour paste. You can use oil-based colours as well if you want. Liquid will change the consistency, don't forget, of your royal icing, but by all means use that. My preference is always paste, as you know. And once all your colour is fully through the royal icing and nice and even, you can put it into your piping bag. Now, I have a piping bag here, which I've cut the end off, and I always use piping nozzles when I do piping of letters because they're nice and round, you get a nice consistent size. If you snip the end off a piping bag, it can kind of come out a little bit square sometimes, which is not what you want. And my preferred size for writing is a number 2. Number 1s, which is slightly smaller, obviously, are very difficult to handle. Like, they're quite difficult to get control over, and you might end up with a wiggly line until you've really mastered the piping. And a number 3 is good if you want to do like big single letters, but a number 2 is just right for kind of lots of stuff. So that's the number 2 nozzle. So just pop that into your piping bag right to the end, and then whack your royal icing in it. And then I like to give my piping bag a twist at the end, which not only helps to push all the royal icing to the tip, it means I can kind of wrap it around my finger. I find it really annoying when you try and do it like this, like a pen, and it will just basically all spurt out the back end, which is not what we want, obviously. So give it a twist, make sure it's all coming out clean and there's no blockages, which that is correct. So now that I've got all my 3 piping bags full of royal icing ready to go, so my top tip for practice, rather than wasting lots of cake and cupcakes and all sorts of expensive things, try just wasting a bit of greaseproof paper, which is super cheap. Best thing about this also is that it's nice and flat, whereas a cake or a cupcake might be slightly round. Also, practicing on a flat surface is going to help you with your balance, because it does take a little bit of practice to kind of do it without leaning on anything. Like if you're doing a big cake, for example, you certainly don't want to be leaning on the cake because that's going to damage it. So my top tip is to use greaseproof paper. Let's get started with some lines. So I like to think of my royal icing as a piece of string. And the piece of string needs to connect at the beginning and at the end, but in between, you can kind of lay that piece of string wherever you like. So starting at one end, make sure it sticks to the top, and then pull, with an even pressure, pull your piping bag away. Now this is my piece of string, and I can lay this piece of string anywhere I like. And when you want to finish your line, bring your piping bag back down, give it a little doink, and that will stick it to the surface. Let's do that again. Pull the string away, lay it down where you need it, and finish it off. And by the same token, you can go wiggling all over the shop. And then finish it off in the same way. Easy. One of the reasons you want to lift it up like this, as if it's a piece of string, is that if you do it too close, you actually have less control. So if you can see, you end up with a less uniform shape. Looks a little bit like an earthworm, and which is not what you want. You want it to be nice and even all the way along. Doink. Now that you've mastered straight lines and wiggles and circles and basically all the shapes, you can then apply all of those techniques to writing, because basically all letters are made up of straight lines and wiggles. So I'm going to start by writing happy birthday. So connect at the top of my H, make my piece of string, do the same in parallel line, and then connect middle to middle. There's the first part of my message. And I want to make sure that I line up all my letters so that they're the same size. So always using the previous letter as a size guide. Now, I'm pretty pleased with the sizing on that, but it did take me a long time to master the same size letters. Quite often at the beginning, I would start this big and end up this big, or vice versa. So I actually worked out a technique of writing which got around that and still looked really cool. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And it's basically none of the letters are the same height or size, which totally fudges the issue if you're worried about not getting the sizing right. So I think that looks really cute, and you can use a mixture of uppercase and lowercase letters to make it really kind of wacky looking, and it's a total cheat if you're not that neat. So it's a good one. You might have seen me doing some dots on there, and dots are their own special thing because dots need to be done slightly differently to lines and wiggles, of course, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So I like to have my piping bag completely vertical to start with. And I'm actually not going to be touching, you know, like I did with the letters. I'm not going to start off touching it onto the paper. I'm going to keep it about a millimetre away and then start squeezing so that it has time to form its little blob. It's not like completely pulling it away, because if you pull it away at the same time as squeezing, you'll end up with these little peaks, which we don't want. The dots are really useful. They're really useful obviously for writing, but they're really useful for decoration and just jazzing things up on your cakes. But yes, sometimes you do get peaks, and that's not ideal. So my tip for that is to have a paintbrush handy with a bit of water and just dampen that. You don't want to saturate it by any means. Just make it a little bit damp, and then using your damp paintbrush, just dab the peaks down. So there is another tip for getting rid of tips. And another tip, if you don't want to do your piping onto your cakes directly, but you want to sort of have a little bit more time, maybe get them ready, get your message ready in advance or whatever, is to pipe onto some sugar paste plaques, which we do at Crumbs Doilies quite a lot. So I've already made these little sugar paste plaques, and they've had time to kind of harden, and this way I can get my message ready in plenty of time, make all the mistakes I want, fix them a million times over, and then when it comes to making my cakes, I can just go ahead and put my message onto my cakes. Or you can do it straight onto your cupcake or your cake, of course, but I do recommend practicing a little bit before you go nuts on your cake, otherwise you might end up having a shaky message. Make sure you're mastering your technique first. But I'm going to just do a few little messages for you guys and just see how I get on. Well, I think I've done enough now, hopefully to give you a little bit of confidence in this technique. I do hope you give it a go. If you do, please do take a picture of it and put it on Instagram using the hashtag MegaFanMonday or CupcakeJemma, and hopefully I will see it. I put my favourite pictures up on my Instagram feed every Monday, and I really think you're going to love using this technique on your cakes. It is really versatile. You might have noticed also that I'm wearing a really cool, colourful CupcakeJemma apron, which is brilliant. I've shortened the straps using a badge too, a CupcakeJemma badge. There's a lot going on here. And you can get your hands on either of these things for your very self at my website, cupcakejemma.com. So go and head over there, grab yourself a nice little treat. And I can't wait to see how you guys get on with the royal icing piping letters. So I'll see you next week. Bye.